another life.
Mention this isn't actually just because of the way I speak or the fact that I happen to come from the UK. It's because it then gets us to this very interesting question, which is, what would restitution ever look like? And what I notice, and what I, as you know, Jordan, in a number of times in the book go into, is this question of reparations, as it's currently called. What one might also call a sort of, what would restitution look like on a number of historic wrongs? And I've been very struck in the last 2 decades in particular by the fact that we have people, and again, Nietzsche puts his finger on it with uncanny precision. I'm struck by the number of people who rip at long closed wounds, rip them open, and then scream at everyone about how hurt they are. Because in actual fact, on a whole range of issues of what we're now reminded are historic wrongs, something like considerable restitution happened an awfully long time ago. I mean, you still hear people saying, it's extremely popular in American discourse, that America never addressed the issue of slavery. And, you sort of think, well, fighting a long and bloody civil war about it would have been one obvious way that they clearly tried to address it. And even that today is poo-pooed. A number of contemporary historians say, oh, it wasn't really about slavery. It was a different power struggle. It never is about the thing that the thing was about.
This guy,
indecipherable.
Well, it's also, I mean, what involved restitution in the Civil War?
What's happening, everybody? On his show, The Majority Report, Sam Seder and co-host Emma Vigeland recently reacted to a clip of Douglas Murray and Jordan Peterson discussing slavery and reparations. Unsurprisingly, Sam Seder and Emma Vigeland insulted Douglas Murray, calling him a slavery apologist. With that, are you ready to see two of the worst people ever, Sam Seder and Emma Vigeland, make fools of themselves responding to Douglas Murray, an actual smart person? Let's go.
As you know, in some circles, racism no longer exists. In some circles, the implications of an entire group of people based upon the color of their skin having been enslaved, and then not just the legacy of slavery, but the ongoing dynamic of suppression. It wasn't just once you move from, literally autonomy and the right to own their own labor and to have autonomy over their lives. Then it moves to the next stage into cannot have any economic or political power. And that just continues through our society and has continued through our society in many different ways. It can be the political power being stripped just simply by gerrymandering. Economic power can be stripped by the way that our tax system was formed, that it was structured on giving breaks to economic structures and even partnerships and relationships that were white people were privileged in that sense. Not necessarily because they were white, but because white people had the political power to implicate the tax system. Could have to do with just the fact that if you were a black man, ages 18 to 24, you were far more likely to go to jail because you smoked a joint than you would if you were white. But in some circles, fortunately, all of that is just really about people being too woke. And I give you Jordan Peterson with Douglas Murray.
Noted Islamophobe.
This was a guy like 5-6 years ago would say we need to make Europe less hospitable to Muslims so they stop coming here.
Very much in the Sam Harris vein.
We should also say no relationship to
Charles Murray.
No. The other note, not biologically.
Although they are ideological bedfellows.
Exactly.
Right.
Ideological sibling.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Another life.
Mention this isn't actually just
Hey, if you like watching videos like this one, like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
because of the way I speak or the fact that I happen to come from the UK. It's because it then gets us to this very interesting question, which is what would restitution ever look like? And what I notice and what I, as you know, Jordan, in a number of times in the book go into is this question of reparations, as it's currently called. What one might also call a sort of what would restitution look like on a number of historic wrongs? And I've been very struck in the last 2 decades in particular by the fact that we have people, and again, Nietzsche puts his finger on it with uncanny precision. I'm struck by the number of people who rip at long closed wounds, rip them open, and then scream at everyone about how hurt they are. Because in actual fact, on a whole range of issues of what we're now reminded are historic wrongs, something like considerable restitution happened an awfully long time ago. I mean, you still hear people saying, it's extremely popular in American discourse, that America never addressed the issue of slavery. And, you sort of think, well, fighting a long and bloody civil war about it would have been one obvious way that they clearly tried to address it. And even that today is poo-pooed. A number of contemporary historians say, oh, it wasn't really about slavery. It was a different power struggle. It never is about the thing that the thing was about.
This guy,
Indecipherable.
well, it's also, I mean, what involved restitution in the Civil War?
Well, he's from Great Britain, and he's giving examples about how these wounds have been closed for a while. Like in Haiti, in the Haitian Civil War, if I'm wrong, the reparations were given to the slave owners. Is this correct?
I'm pretty sure we compensated slave owners in the United States.
I just want to make sure I was right about
like,
Haiti. Like no reparations to the enslaved people, but to the slave owners to make up for the fact that they had lost significant capital.
We know what 40 acres and a mule was and how it wasn't followed through upon.
Right. But why would he cite the Civil War in the same breath as an example of reparations or restitutions being addressed? No.
Notice what he says here. He says he slips in a word that kind of shows how much of a charlatan he is. He says where they tried to address it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fascinating. And the only people who are arguing that the Civil War was not about slavery are, in fact, his ideological bedfellows.
This is a very interesting question because yes, there's a whole bunch of Confederate sort of like the South will rise again type folks that said this was about Lincoln being overreaching in terms of like a tyrant or whatever. But like the actual question as to when like Lincoln or other Union leaders or even Union soldiers, when they went to fight, initially it was for the Union. Like Lincoln explicitly wasn't anti-slavery because he needed to keep Kentucky and Maryland and those slave states in the Union. So it was like that sort of question is a very interesting one and a very revealing one for like, who was supporting liberation, who was saying we can wait forever, like a white moderate would, like we can just let like our normal I mean that, yeah, I'm kind of getting flustered, but like that sort of ahistorical, like we try, like I just want to play that one more time because he says where we
and
tried
I meant France earlier. Sorry, my brain got confused. Keep going. Right. Yeah,
where we tried to do
long time ago. I mean, you still hear people saying it's extremely popular in American discourse that America never addressed the issue of slavery. And you sort of think, well, fighting a long and bloody civil war about it would have been one obvious way that they clearly tried to address it.
Well, it's like he also shifted from reparations to addressing slavery. What does that mean, addressing?
Like we had a fight over it because the South was frankly paranoid that Lincoln was going to do something that he wasn't actually planning to do, which was get rid of slavery. But
these two people on their own are on the insufferable Mount Rushmore, okay? But when you put them together, the insufferableness, I don't know if that's a word, it doesn't just add, it's an exponential effect. Like Power Rangers or Voltron, where you've got, multiple people and then they come together in that one big suit. Just imagine these two come together in a big suit. It creates this unstoppable, woke, virtue signaling, insufferable machine that can't be stopped. I know I'm new to YouTube, so I don't know how many people regularly watch my videos, but hopefully there's some out there. I just want to give you a heads up. I'm going to be putting out a poll because I want to start a douchebag hall of fame that's voted on by the viewers of this show. So I'm just giving you a heads up. I guess A, do you like the idea? B, would you do me a favor and look out for that poll? Because I think we can have maybe behind me, maybe some nice plaques that honor these people's douchiness. Last thing I'll say, like probably 6 months to a year ago, Cenk Uygur would have been top of the list. Anna Kasparian would have been on that list, but they are way low in the candidate pool right now. So I've been thinking about that forever, but I guess what made me think of it here is, so obviously I can't stand Sam Seder, but this chick with him, Emma Vigeland, every time she speaks, it's like nails on a chalkboard to me. I've never seen her speak a rational opinion in my entire life. Just think of everything that you don't like about the identitarian left. She takes all of those qualities to the nth degree, immeasurable. I mean, every answer is the PC SJW woke answer. Oh, again, the lengths I go to for you guys to sit through these videos. I'm just kidding, because you're obviously sitting through it now too. But anyway, let me know if we need to get the douchebag Hall of Fame going. I'll probably do it either way if I get responses or not. But if I don't get a lot of responses in the poll or people making comments in the comment section on different videos, I'll wait till the audience gets maybe a little larger and people are more engaged. But because I want this to be a consensus, I want us all to agree that when you see someone's face on the wall behind me, or whether maybe it's just a graphic or something, that when you see it, we can all laugh together. But there's going to be some tight races out there. But I'll tell you what, these two, especially during and after this video, they are making strong cases. They are strong contenders. Do not sleep on them. Do you notice how when speaking about the awful practice of slavery, that both of these two make a concerted effort to make sure that the look on their faces conveys to you how disgusted and concerned they are for Black Americans. And that's how you know they are very serious about slavery, and it signals to the world that they're the good white people, okay? And aren't people like these two becoming a dying breed? Like, people are in on the grift now, right? I think people of every race know now that this over-the-top outrage and the demonization of white people is usually self-serving or misguided somehow. Let me know in the comments if you disagree, or is this SJW movement, stronger than ever? But I know there's still a lot of people that voted against Donald Trump, but I think the people who did were kind of rejecting this BS and saying enough. And dumbass Sam Seder doesn't understand why he'd bring up the Civil War when talking about slavery. And Sam Seder said that he doesn't understand what Douglas Murray means when he says, we've tried to address slavery. He's like, what does address mean? What do you think it means, Sam? I'm not going to answer that question for you. That's the dumbest question. I mean, you're just being contrarian to be contrarian. And you ask, what has America given up in this fight for slavery, and how have Black Americans been compensated? You probably think I'm going to go into all the various programs for different minorities in the country, but I'll go with one that I think's a pretty big sacrifice. How about all the Americans that died in the Civil War? How's that for reparations? I'll tell you what, it's a lot more valuable than money. Two twats that sit behind a microphone and play armchair QB have zero concept of what real sacrifice looks like because it's not in their DNA. They're liberals. They can't even conceive that level of sacrifice. So, in their defense, it's easy for them to overlook. These two have never, ever, and will never be faced with a situation that requires courage or bravery. And to be fair to them, a lot of Americans haven't. But normal people understand that people laying down their lives is a pretty costly sacrifice. As a matter of fact, isn't that the ultimate price? These two just hate this country and make their entire livelihood complaining about it. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
And the idea that just you've addressed slavery by ending it. No, that's not the idea of restitution and reparations is.
It's not just acknowledgement.
It's not just, well, it's not even not just, it's, I mean, like, I don't think you're acknowledging it just by ending it.
Yeah.
Because you're claiming that the implications of enslaving a specific population of your society, that the implications end the day slavery ends, which is absurd. And that's like, I put a chain around your leg and I started a race. Your opponent ran down the field and is 400 yards ahead of you, but I took your chain off, so I've addressed the imbalance that existed. I mean, it's just absurd. It's just an absurd.
Yeah, I mean, there's those studies on like the leading families of the Confederacy had basically recovered their wealth by a few generations later. And like, this is why you need to think of like the material and like property inheritance we get. So like slaves, black people forced to build like the docks, all the infrastructure of all these southern places. And then slavery's over. And like, what's the solution is move north, like leave all that stuff behind that you built with your labor and let the like capitalist class just own that and try to administer that as best they can as you are like sharecroppers.
And then we also need to pretend that the slavery was in just a structure in our society that just existed like it just appeared. As opposed to there being, as opposed to there being certain ideologies and perspectives about black people and about white people that created that institution, as if the absence of that institution completely got rid of the substructure that built that institution, and that it just evaporates overnight and it's gone. Instead, we have ample evidence and examples of how that structure remained to this day and builds other structures and other functions in our society that continue to maintain or attempt to maintain that political and economic dynamic.
Why are you ripping open closed wounds, right?
Exactly.
Like the idea that asking for reparations is ripping open a closed wound and then asking why it hurts or whatever he said. That there's no way around it. He is blaming essentially black people for complaining too much.
Yep.
And obscuring the reality of the lesson of the Civil War, which is that indeed it was, even despite Lincoln, fighting for the Union or whatever initially, like it did become about slavery, and it was obviously to protect slavery for the Confederates. Damn, I lost my train of thought just trying to get that all in. No, I lost it.
That's fine.
Oh, sorry, just real quick, that the failure of Reconstruction, like if the Civil War was a revolution in support of like anti-racism and against slavery, the failure of Reconstruction was a restoration of white supremacy.
Of course, Jim Crow. Like, like it wasn't that like, oh, slavery ended racism in the country. It all went away. And then it came back a couple of 20, 30 years later. Like we sent it off in a ship and it just went around the bend.
You know what? I just realized that I realized kind of what he's getting at there, and maybe he gets to it later in that interview. But it's like, why aren't you grateful enough for the fact that we liberated you via the Civil War?
Yeah,
Those
exactly.
are the reparations. Like, be more grateful, and you're ripping up open old wounds that we closed for you as the white race. And asking for too much.
And when the secret is like, this guy would have been on the side of the Confederacy, or at least at the very least a Copperhead, saying like, I really don't like what Lincoln's doing with habeas corpus, and that for that reason I support Jefferson Davis.
And we should also say, I mean, if you have not been listening to this program for an extended period of time, we have done many interviews on what happened during Reconstruction in terms of the literal violent coups where Black people gained any political power in places like South Carolina, North Carolina, other states across the Confederacy. The reemergence, or the not reemergence, the reinstatement of a white supremacy regime in this country in the form of Jim Crow after 8 years of Reconstruction where there was some pushback on this. And you go through our archives. We should maybe send it to this guy so that he can see that, it doesn't look like the wounds had quite sealed up in the way that you had. And also, if you don't clean out those wounds, they end up getting infected.
I'm sure he'll be receptive when we send him that material.
They did an awful lot of bitching about slavery and reparations. Gave us quite a history lesson from their point of view. But maybe I wasn't listening closely enough. Did you hear a single solution other than inferring that Black Americans need reparations? How would that work? What if one of your parents is white and one of them is Black? One of their parents' families owned slaves, and one of their parents' families were slaves. What do we do in that situation? And also, there are a lot of Black Americans that have come over from other countries. Because of their skin color, do they just get handed a big lump sum of cash? Where's the money going to come from to fund all this money we're supposed to give Black Americans? You'd think since they're so smart, besides just complaining about what someone else said, they'd say, here's the solution. That's just the tip of the iceberg as far as all the issues with how reparations would work. But none of these idiots ever address anything like that. And if I were a betting man, I would assume that the Democrat Party doesn't want Black Americans to ever receive reparations because they can keep running on it and keep bringing it up and keep dividing the people of the country by race, socioeconomic status, religion, everything else they do, and divide the various groups that the left has created because they want us at each other's throats, so we can't see the bigger picture. We're too focused on that. We can't see all the nefarious things that they're doing. When I say they, I mean, of course, politicians on both sides of the aisle, but also the elite class, because if they create this problem of pitting races and other groups against one another, well, then they created the problem. Then when it gets out of hand, the government gets to come in and save us from this horrible problem that they created and take yet a little bit more power back to the federal government and take a little bit more away from us each time. Anyway, if you like mostly conservative people making sound, logical arguments and then watching two complete morons try to pick them apart, then click on one of the two videos that just popped up on your screen. Otherwise, as always, I really appreciate you watching today. The end.